All right, hello everyone. Thank you for waiting. Had a little bit of technical difficulties this morning, but ready to get going. That's what happens when you have live webinars. So I'm just going to jump right in since we're already 2 minutes past. Well, actually, I'm gonna just give it 1 minute for everybody to get into the webinar. Let me do that first. Make sure everybody's fully joined before we get going. I can see people adding. Good. As soon as it starts to slow down, then we'll get going. All right, the number seems to be slowing down. So thank you everybody for joining. This is a different kind of topic for us today than we normally do, but we're excited to welcome Wade Baker. And we've also got help from Joan Elias, who both these guys are at Cyentia and were deeply involved in the creation of this IRIS report. For those of you that aren't familiar, IRIS is a report that's been around for a few years and is supported by CISA. So it's got a great wealth of data that it draws from another vendor, and then also you'll see how they use Feedly to supplement some of that data for the more current time horizon. But we'll also be joined by Chris Pickard. Chris is our product manager for Feedly on the threat intelligence side, and he will be helping us with a couple of short demos to show how you can get some of this information out of Feedly. But most of the webinar is going to be focused on the results from this study. Before we get too far into this, one thing I want to do is introduce my speakers. So as I mentioned, Wade Baker, he is the co-founder of Cyentia and also a professor at Virginia Tech. And I've got Chris Pickard. Wade, do you want to just say a couple words about yourself and your background?
Absolutely. Glad to be here. First of all, thanks everybody for joining. My background can be summed up. I've been looking at security incidents and losses, as many as I can manage to scrounge together for a long time. Was involved in the starting of the Verizon data breach report a long time ago, and then have just continued in. And this is a series that sort of picks up the torch there. So always like talking about security incidents, even though they represent bad days for a lot of organizations. I enjoy it.
It's good. Chris?
Oh, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Chris, product manager at Feedly. I've been at Feedly for around 3 years. First as a threat intelligence advisor, before moving to the product team, where I get to work on like solving problems, building new features, which is pretty cool. And then before that, I worked in threat intelligence as an analyst and for an MSSP, and I was also a Feedly customer, interestingly. So yeah, so happy to be here.
Awesome, Joran. I know you weren't prepared for this, but I'm gonna go ahead and bring you into the conversation as well.
Sure, thank you. So I'm also at Cyentia. I'm a data scientist there. My background is in statistics. I have a PhD in statistics. I've been doing data science in a variety of areas for well over a decade. Excited to be a part of Cyentia and be dealing with incident data like Wade said.
And
Awesome.
Sorry to break in here. Sean mentioned Joran is here to answer your questions. So we're going to be going through a lot of data, and you're probably going to have questions that we don't address during the talk. Hit Joran up in the Q&A, and he'll try to take those on. He might bounce some to be answered live. We'll just see how it gets. But just know you've got a very knowledgeable person that did the actual analysis that you're looking at, and you can ask that person questions.
I'll do my best.
Yep, absolutely. I was going to get there. And the other thing I will say is that we are recording this. We will provide the recording probably tomorrow. We'll give you a link to the recording. So everybody who registered will get a link. So one of the things we always like to do before we get started is to do a couple of rounds of finish the sentence. So finish the sentence real simple, just your first thought, the best thought that comes into your head. The questions they're different. Chris is always asking me, what's the question beforehand? And that's the purpose, is you do not give the questions out ahead of time. I haven't even decided what questions I'm asking until right at this moment. But all right, so here's the first question. So I'll start with you, Wade. One thing I'm curious about right now is
What the question is going to be. That's cheating, but that's going to be my answer. I'm always curious about what we're going to see this year in cyber trends and stuff. That question legit drives me over most of my career. So that's one of those two.
Chris.
See, this has happened. My brain has gone dead. My brain has gone blank. One thing I'm curious about, um, I don't know.
First
Which,
thought, best thought.
huh?
Your first thought is your best thought. Just go for it.
I don't know why my mind just goes to video games. I'm like, which video game am I going to play next?
Fair enough.
Very unrelated
Video.
to this. Yeah, that's where it went.
Jordan.
So I'm gonna take a little bit of a left turn. I'm curious. My wife has volunteered us to foster a cat starting today. So I'm curious what
Ah,
what kind
that's
of
a good one.
what kind of cat we're gonna get for a foster cat.
I'm curious about longevity. It's been this thing over the last year, like how do I live the healthiest life for the rest of my life? And so anything that has to do with longevity stuff, I've been totally into in the last year. One more question. One thing I'm looking forward to is Wade.
My sons have all-star baseball tournaments starting this weekend. So I love baseball, love my sons too. So the combo of the two is something to look forward to.
Awesome. Jordan.
I am looking forward to getting outside in the mountains near around Missoula where I live because the weather has turned from the rainy cold spring to beautiful sunny weather, and so I'm looking forward to running and biking around in the
I forgot you were from Missoula. I remember that from before. I went to school in Missoula. Chris, one thing you're looking forward to.
So I've been playing a sport called paddle, which is becoming like really popular, like around Europe and places like that. So, yeah, I've been a bit obsessed with it, playing it a lot. But I've got my first like real coaching session this weekend, and so I'm excited to like learn how to actually play it properly. So yeah, I'm excited for that.
And my daughter is graduating from college in 2 weeks, so exciting about that. So looking forward to that. All right, so we're gonna jump in again. One last thing before I go, just for those of you who aren't too familiar with Feedly, let me give you a quick 1 minute overview here. So for Feedly is all about giving you actionable, intelligent, or real time, and we help you with AI. So whether it's emerging vulnerabilities, whether you're trying to understand threat actor behavior, cyber attacks, collect IOCs, maybe even understand geopolitical risks, that's where Feedly is doing it. And the question about how we do that is we collect from over 100 million sources. We collect around millions of documents every day, and our AI looks through all those documents. It pulls out the important things. So it tags things like threat actors and malware and IOCs, and it pulls all that stuff into what we call the Feedly Threat Graph. And the Threat Graph is a relationship database that understands all of the relations between those different entities and attributes. And then you can take all that data and you can see it in different ways. So you can see it through dashboards and insights cards. You can have it as personal news feeds. So you really personalize them down to the things that you care about. You can use Ask AI to ask questions about the articles and the data. So you could, look at up to 25 different articles about a particular cyber attack, for instance, and have it synthesize all the data into something that's meaningful and easier to understand. You can send all that stuff out through newsletters and reports. You can integrate with your tips, your SIMs, etc. And we have a Stix API that if you don't support it through some of our no-code integrations, you can get the data that way. So essentially, we collect all that information, we process it, we really help automate the intelligence organization of it, and then give you different ways that you can disseminate it or understand it better so that you can help inform your teams. So with that said, I'm going to pass the baton over to Wade, and Wade is going to take the ball from here.
All right, let's do it.
Again, please ask questions in the Q&A, and somebody will either answer them in the background, or if they're something that we want to address for everybody, we'll also break into the call and ask those questions live.
All right. Thanks. And like I said, looking forward to this. So Sean mentioned this, but just want to throw it up here. The Information Risk Insights study we've been doing this for 5 years now. If you look at Cyentia.com/iris, you're going to see several different versions of this study. We first published it in 2020. You see the 2022 here, and then we're releasing the 2025 edition within the next couple weeks. And you're getting a preview, essentially, of what is in store in the 2025 Iris. We've done some others that you can look around. These are all free, by the way. The last several have been sponsored by CISA, however you say that. It's all free. You can, I'm going to show you this slide again later, but if you like what you see and you want to be notified when the 2025 edition is out, you can hit that Cyentia.com/iris link or the QR code there, and we'll let you know when it's out. Okay, so let's do this. Actually, I'm gonna break this and then circle back to this question. Are security incidents more common? This report is in a series of questions. All of these questions are the kinds of things that I, as a risk analyst, want to know. You know, if I'm trying to manage cyber risk, figure out, hey, is it getting riskier out there for my organization or less? And when you break down risk, you know, you have things like frequency and losses. You might have several questions, and you're going to see this is organized in questions that I think make sense. So are security incidents more common? Now, that may bring up an obvious, like, well, duh, of course they are. You know, but there's a few caveats to keep in mind, and some of them have to do with data sources here. All right, so we are primarily interested in incidents that rise to the public domain, public awareness. We're not focused. We have no visibility into just run-of-the-mill malware infections that, you know, someone wipes, reinstalls a laptop, no PII affected, no outages, no nothing, probably not going to make it into this data set. We're using public information, a lot of historical incidents that did trigger disclosure laws or had large-scale outages that people recognized, had lawsuits that became part of public knowledge. That's how we're compiling the bulk of this information. And some of those take time, which is why we approach Feedly to get a more timely view of these things. So if you want to know more information, there's a methodology section in the report. I don't want to waste too much time, but just know that we're pulling from public sources, and these are significant enough incidents that they become public knowledge. And when we're doing frequency and losses and all this kind of thing that we're about to do, just keep that in the back of your mind. All right, so let's dig into it. Here's a chart of what the prevalence of losses looks, or loss events or incidents, cyber events, all of these terminology we're going to use the same way. So if we rewind the clock back to 2008, we were seeing about 450 of those emerge in any given quarter. Fast forward to last year, that was 3,000. So a 6.5-fold increase. That's a lot, right? And you can see this ebbs and flows in the report. We talk about why some of these things might be increasing and then slowing down. Ransomware, for example, has been a big upward force on the total number of security incidents over the past several years. And one thing I want to note here is, notice this Q4 bar for 2024. It's about half as much. The data sources that we have used in the IRIS traditionally, again, public disclosures, SEC filings, lawsuits, each of those comes with a certain amount of lag before it works its way into the public domain. And we were really interested in how could we get around that? You know, what would be a more timely source of keeping tabs on incidents rather than sort of letting them filter their way to us. And that prompted the Feedly conversation. And here's a version of this chart with Feedly incidents added to it. And I thought this was really cool because rather than saying, oh, well, Q4 looks like it's, we're reversing the trend and declining, it's actually increasing and the highest level ever. So you get kind of a different story there. And again, the difference here between this is public disclosures, all of those kinds of things as far as how do we track incidents that emerge. And this is using Feedly's Cyberattack AI and other models they have to watch out for news of incidents as it kind of emerges. So Chris, I'm going to kind of pass it over to you. I know you're doing a lot of work on how you're recognizing these and what you're doing and those kinds of things. So I think it might be helpful to set some context there because this is kind of a blend of two different data sets, if you will.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll just share my screen. So yeah, as Wade mentioned, we've been working on a feature to help users identify like the latest cyber attacks, and also like trending cyber attacks, historical attacks, and because there are so many, like yeah, you can see my screen.
Yep.
So this is filtering on Q4 of 2024. You can see here we've got 3,482 attacks here. So this is pulling from all open source sites basically. So SEC filings, breach sites, ransomware sites, things like that. So we're trying to pull from as much as possible to learn about these cyber attacks as early as possible, basically. Once we've identified an attack, there'll be an entry for it in this dashboard. But because there are so many to filter through or to get through, we created a bunch of filters to be able to find ones that are relevant to our users. So we can use this AND operator here to filter. There's a bunch of different filters. We've got trending, filter based on attack types, continents, targeted companies, threat actors, malware. But the most popular filters we've seen being used are like industries or countries. Just to be able to drill down that way. So I'm just going to select, we've got a bunch of industries here to choose from. I'm going to select the electronics industry here. And so this narrows it down to 37 attacks out of that 3,000 plus. And then from the dashboard here, you can see the overall trend. We've got the targeted countries here. So you can see which countries were impacted and which companies within those countries were attacked. We've got targeted most active malware. We've got other industries that might fall within, some companies might be part of multiple industries there. Most active threat actors, the malware types, attack types here, and targeted companies by size. This is based on that employee count. And yeah, once that's kind of like a general overview of like the landscape, once you've set the filters. And then once you have that, we have this table here. So these are sorted by trending, which is kind of like how frequently they've been mentioned within the time frame set. So we can see that Casio here is at the top. And we have like the reported date, when it was last reported, when we last saw the article. And importantly, we got the actual attack date. So once we learn about when that attack occurred, mostly after the fact, we will kind of backdate it and include that information. And yeah, we have a bunch of other columns here, which kind of just gives you an at-a-glance view of the attacks that have occurred based on the filters set. But what's great here is we've got what we call the Cyberattack Insights card. So when you see an attack that's relevant or that you want to learn more about, you can go into this card here and basically learn everything you need to know about this attack. So we have some information in the header here, such as like the industry, how many employees they have, the type of attack, as well as and then we have like an attack summary. So this is like going to be updated as we receive more information. We'll generate this attack summary, including any like sources that are based on the information we're pulling from. Any IOCs linked to the attack or associated with the attack will be exportable as well in different formats. And then I think this is my favorite bit. We have this timeline of events. So as things unfold over time, so from the initial disclosure all the way through to, like legal repercussion, when we see something of interest, we will generate a timeline event here. So it's easy to kind of track what's happened within that attack itself.
As someone who has manually put those timelines together many times, I really appreciate that, I'll just say.
Yeah, it's really cool. And yeah, so some attacks, especially like the bigger attacks like this, is really good to go back and see kind of like, how they're progressing, how things are progressing with those attacks. And yeah, we have the sources available as well for all of that. Below that, we have any associated threat actors. So we are kind of linking these attacks to, or linking threat actors and malware to these attacks once we identify a relationship or an association. So then you can learn more about how they're linked, what happened there, and then also learn more about those entities. And then what's really cool is we map all the tactics, the TTPs essentially. So as we learn more about those attacks and we're seeing which techniques were used to carry out that attack, we'll start adding them to this card. And yeah, they'll be exportable. They'll update over time as we learn more information. And we also include all of the sources that we're pulling from here as well. So everything we're collecting from, everything that's relevant to this attack will be available in the insights cards. So yeah, that's kind of a quick overview of how to track cyber attacks in Feedly.
Cool. Like I said, it was very useful in terms of trying to get more timely information for us in producing this report. So appreciate you guys working with us. So let's move on. Obviously, overall incidents are increasing per the last slide, but not all types of incidents are increasing at the same rate or even at all. I mentioned earlier that ransomware is really on an upswing. This is, by the way, what we call incident patterns. Chris, I think you might call these the types of attacks or categories or something along those lines. But what type of incident was it? Was it ransomware? Was it a system intrusion, denial of service attack, et cetera? But certain ones of these are on the upswing, certain ones declining. Again, we could spend this whole time talking about why and the trends and what these means. There is some of that information in the report, and I'll just have to point you there because I'm really interested in hitting the high level stuff as we go through here. But just know that the answer to that question, are incidents becoming more common, is overall yes, but not all types of incidents. All right, let's move on to a different question. Do incident trends differ across organizations? This is another thing where I think it's somewhat of an obvious answer. Like, yes, we all have this intuitive sense that not all organizations experience the same kind of events, but it's nice to study that and measure it and see what's really going on there. So if we just ask the question, of all incidents that we know about, are they happening to small firms, large organizations, or somewhere in between? By and large, the majority of incidents are happening to small and medium firms. 70% of incidents affect organizations of less than 100 million in annual revenue, with the largest of the large down here at a fairly low proportion. Again, this is of all those incidents that we know about collectively. However, if we normalize that based on the number of organizations there are in each segment, obviously there's many more times small organizations. I think small organizations make up something like 99.9% of all companies on earth, or something like that. It's sort of like, of course they're going to have more incidents. If we account for that fact and we kind of get a relative frequency of incidents based on the number of organizations in each segment, you see a complete reversal. Right now, the largest organizations, the mega corporations, 100 billion in annual revenue plus, is on top, and the smaller ones are on the bottom, and it's like 620 times more incidents than organizations in that top segment, and it goes down from there. So you kind of have to think about, all right, what are we talking about? Are we talking about more overall incidents? Are we talking about relative frequency? Because you're going to get different answers. And if we take that concept of the relative frequency and we look at sectors, we see some interesting trends, right? We have certain sectors in the left chart that are historically higher than average. These 2x, 4x, 6x are kind of from the baseline norm across all industries. Traditionally, the information services sector, education, financial services, healthcare, these are higher than typical. And, some of them are trending down, like financial services, for instance. I think is pretty interesting over the last 15 years is actually trending down in that relative frequency. We could, conjecture why that is. Could be traditionally they're spending a lot on security. They have some great teams. They have large security budgets. They're fairly mature, relatively speaking. So we may actually see that those investments working, right? More discussion like this in the report, and I think will take place afterwards. But that's what the data shows. On the right side of this chart, there are industries listed there that are historically lower than average in terms of relative frequency, but they're trending up. And when I look at this list, I sort of have a supply chain, tech theme, right? Manufacturing, mining of these materials, transporting them around, utilities, and the fact that those are increasing. I don't want to read too much into stuff like this, but this is like represents a lot of the old school. I need PII, I need payment information. These are the places I'm going to get it, and that's what's driving breaches. Whereas the fact that these are increasing, little bit different nature to why you would attack these kinds of companies and why they're in the crosshairs. So interesting to see shifts like this over time. I know this is quick, folks, but I want to get the information there for you, and we have questions. We're around. You can find us if you have information. So probability is something that is critical to understanding risk. We've been talking about frequency and relative frequency, but it's not the same as asking the question for my organization. What is the likelihood that we're going to have an incident in the next year, increasing or decreasing? And that's what we're looking at in this section. Annualized probability. Are we seeing that go up or down over time? This chart makes it clear it's going up. About a 2.5% chance that any given organization will have an incident back in 2008, and that's upwards of 10% most recently. Again, this is all organizations of all types and sizes, just any old security incident. What's the probability of that occurring? Almost a 4x increase in that over this time span. However, there's a lot of caveats in this report. Again, it's not the same for all organizations. Check out the largest. The probability that a $100 billion plus organization will have an incident is actually declining from around 70% back in 2008 to, quote, just 15%. They're still at the higher of different organizations now, but it's gotten a lot less. And I find that pretty interesting, right? Again, I can go back to, is this because these organizations have huge security budgets and are generally more mature and probably highly regulated and all of these kinds of factors, and they're seeing some success in driving down the probability of suffering incidents. Writ large, not all 100 billion plus organizations, right? This is just the whole lot of them. Whereas the probability is increasing kind of in the small to mid-size space. This is where we're seeing they are more likely now, about twice as likely to suffer incidents now than before. And again, I like to think of these large scale movements. You might say that the attack surface is growing faster than SMB's ability to protect it. Might be one explanation that we have here. Maybe their security budgets can't keep up with the increase in being targeted or the scale at which attackers are able to move. So lots of reasons that we could put behind these, but probabilities definitely kind of depends on where you look. All right, this is the one that I think a lot of people want to know. We've talked about frequency and probability. Let's talk about losses, the dollars and cents behind security incidents. Have security incidents gotten more costly? When we do this, keep in mind that we're still based on public information. This is based on anything that is reported or can be gleaned about the financial losses associated with an incident. We can't quantify the soft costs or the impact of, having the CISO fired or, other things like that. But anything that can be quantified and is public information, that's what's represented here. And this is the overall loss distribution. Just want to note that it's on a log scale, so it looks sort of balanced-ish, but this is actually a really, really long tail running from 1 million out to over 1 billion. All right. If you did this on a normal scale, it would be very, very, very long tailed. But any given incident, the median loss is about 600K. We use the 95th percentile. Sometimes you'll see the 90th percentile to represent more extreme losses, and that stands at 32 million. We put the mean, the average loss in here, but we just don't recommend using the average losses because the distribution is so warped. So, the median is going to give you a little bit better, the typical, and then you can go with something like 95th for a big loss. So the question is, what does this look like over time, right? And there's a couple different ways we can, I'm going to go back to that slide in just a minute. But if we take that single loss distribution, we take those 2 points, here's the 50th, here's the median loss. If we rewind the clock back in 2008, that was about 190K, under 200K per incident, typical. To where we're now about 3 million is the median loss, trending that out to 2024. Same thing on the 90th percentile, again, representing a more extreme, serious loss, increase from 6 million to 29 million. So losses are definitely trending up. This is not aggregate losses. This is on a per event basis. Just keep that in mind. But these things are increasing at a pretty good clip. Again, I think this is something that people generally think, yeah, security incidents are getting more expensive, but how much more and at what rate is a question. This is another area where we collaborated with Feedly in getting loss information, because again, we have sort of our traditional sources that we use in the iris of losses. Some of those channels take a while, and some of them are incomplete. I'll just say that tracking losses is not easy for this kind of thing because you get bits and pieces of the information sort of breadcrumbed out over a long period of time. Like you may have such and so incident happened, initial loss estimated at this. Then there's a class action lawsuit that is enacted maybe years later that comes to fruition, and then that loss is updated. So these losses, if you're trying to get a sense of really what is the sum total of losses for this incident, you've got to pay attention and collect data for years. Not easy. So this is another place where we use some Feedly models. Chris already talked about the Cyberattack model, but there's a financial difficulties model, and you can kind of blend these things, which I thought was very cool. So we looked for cyber attacks where there was information about financial difficulties. And it's super interesting to me that the losses that are discovered there are much larger. And this sparked a lot of conversations internally and that kind of thing about, okay, what does that mean and why? And, I think that's because if we look at just actuarial data, you have little claims and you have lots of little bits of losses that work their way through. But, something's going to not create a buzz unless it's significant. And so I think this is a good and better way to focus in on the significant losses, right? Because those are going to make headlines and generate some articles that Feedly is going to collect. And you're not, most people don't care about $10,000 losses anyway. So there's a lot of those little things for little events that are out there, but pretty big differences depending on how we break this up. Chris, you got some thoughts or something on this?
Yeah, I guess it'd be cool to show like how you were doing that in Feedly. Do you want me to do that after or like?
Yeah, I don't have it up, but if anyone wants to know, I'm happy to share. But it is the combination of that Cyberattack AI model and the financial difficulties, and just trying to find events that meet those conditions. And then we did some filtering through those to figure out, okay, is this financial difficulty associated with the cyber attack? Because that's not necessarily the case, but it was really useful for finding out and padding out what we were able to study. All right, so losses as a proportion of revenue. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but you can read it in the report. I mean, if you think a giant organization has a loss, and that loss is going to affect them more than they're going to lose more money than a small organization, right? So the median loss for a $10 billion or more organization is $2 million, and it's a lot less for less than $100 million. But if you look at these numbers, the median loss for a less than $100 million is a substantially higher proportion of their annual revenue, right? Than $2 million to a $10 billion company. So that proportionality is something that we study in the report. And, the typical incident was just a fraction of annual revenues on average back in 2008. And it's still a fraction, but it's growing a lot. And those more extreme losses are growing as well. So yes, incidents in absolute terms are costing more. We saw that in the prior slide, but relative impact, relative harm, pain, they are more painful now as a part of the bottom line as well. So you kind of want to know those two things if you're trying to get a sense of risk over time. And I'll just throw this up there to say that I think these kinds of trends are really important to monitor for your organization. It's helpful to know that overall incidents are becoming more costly. But that trend is different depending on how big you are or what sector you're in. So professional service firms, when we look at losses, trending up a lot, 26 times higher for the typical loss over the last 15 years for professional service firms, incidents that affect professional service firms. Whereas retail, it's a lot lower. And again, I feel like a broken record saying we do discuss this some in the report, but obviously this brings up why is retail lower cost? Well, I did a lot of incident response investigations back then. This is when we started the data breach investigations report, 2008. That's when the first one published, and that thing was chock full of retail incidents of simple point of sale breaches where they installed, some type of skimmer that just collected cards. It was before chip and PIN, and you could just get massive quantities of payment card information from a retail breach if you pretty simply. And generally you have something like that. The larger the breaches are, generally leads to more cost, although not in linear fashion. Like you'll see, it's not a per record kind of value. But over time, the size of the typical retail breach has declined, and therefore I think the costs have too. You've had technology changes like chip and PIN, which minimizes the amount of data that can be compromised from a single retailer, right? And you have PCI regulation that is mandating encryption, and I think that is kind of showing some effect of all of those things. Probably doesn't explain every bit of it, but I think it does at least some of it. So losses are going to be trending differently for your firm is the, I think, important takeaway, and getting some sense of where that's going is pretty important.
Hey, Wade, there was one question that maybe you want to
Oh,
try
yeah,
here.
yeah. Sorry, I'm not monitoring questions at all,
Yeah,
but hit me
no,
up.
it's fine. It was actually posted a little bit ago, but it's a little bit more general. So it says increase in healthcare incidents labeled as professionals in the second graph, which was a couple graphs ago. Implementation of EHRs and more data available. I wonder how many other sectors have critical juncture type of changes over time that drive changes. So perhaps small to mid-sized companies have an implementation that increases the profitability of targeting or the probability of targeting.
Yeah. And I think what I was just talking about is of retail with chip and pin might be an example. Like, I think that was a technology juncture that, you know, had an effect on risk and trends in that sector. I think that as organizations have you know, rapidly digitized, that changes their digital footprint, that changes their attack surface, that changes the ease at which they can be attacked. And those things do have effects. And there's blending of some of those surfaces as well, right? With supply chain attacks. And regulation is always a factor. Healthcare was mentioned. So, you know, we tend to see more breaches reported in the healthcare sector, not necessarily because they happen more frequently, but because when they do happen, they need to be reported and then they become public information, whereas that hasn't always been the case at the same level in all industries. So there's a ton of different regulatory, technological risk. I mean, we haven't really even talked about controls that are implemented and all of those things intertwined behind every single graph that you see here, which is fascinating, I think. All right, so let's look at I'm gonna actually really quick just preview this section, refer you to the report. You probably have a sense that different types of incidents have a different cost profile, and they do. You know, denial of service ransomware events tend to be a little bit more costly than accidental disclosures. Okay. I'm going to leave you with that. I'll also say that some of those different types of incidents, as far as the cost of them, is trending in different ways. Ransomware, we mentioned earlier, is becoming more frequent, but it's also becoming more costly. So that's kind of a double whammy from a risk perspective that you'd rather not see, but there it is, right? We need to figure out how to deal with that. If it's both becoming more frequent and more costly, probably something that we should think about in terms of risk mitigation strategies. So sorry to just breeze through that, but I want to get to intrusion methods. This is an interesting one. Lot to look at in this slide, but what you're looking at is the proportion of incidents that involved this MITRE attack initial access technique. So back in 2016, 57, over half of incidents for which we knew the initial access techniques involved valid accounts. And I put GOAT on here because it sort of is the greatest initial access technique of all time. It's on top. And it just stayed there. So you always, this is not going to surprise you if you've read any reports. But not all of them are trending. You know, they're trending in different directions. So exploiting public applications is up, right, from single-digit percents for the first several years to where it's over a third of incidents more recently. Again, this is one of those things. Hey, why is that? Well, as we've moved to remote and cloud infrastructure, and as we have more access to manage those remote devices, well, we need applications, and they're out there, and accessing them is a big deal. Partner that with increase in external remote services. Again, the way that we are able to remote in and control and administer systems, both of those are trending up because it's about access. I mean, we need that access to manage our systems, but they become avenues for attacks as well. And so I think that's why you see some of those increasing. On the other hand, hardware additions, replication through removable media, not as common. These are not the best way to scale an attack if you're an attacker. These would represent harder, more higher cost attacks. You might have to resort to this for a very, very, very targeted or hardened target, but probably not your first choice if you're an attacker. So lots going on here. And this is another area where collaboration with Feedly was very interested. And Chris, I think you're going to show some of this in a moment. But the truth be told, our primary data in the iris is not the best place to get extensive detail. It's not forensic level reporting, right? It's when a company discloses an incident, they're going to provide minimum detail. I wish that were not the case, but that generally is. And so, we get what we can. And this is one of the reasons why I'm just going to highlight supply chain compromise, right? Like, for whatever reason, in the historical data that we have, that is dead last. Like, we hardly ever see it. Now, that could be for many different reasons. It's not worded in such a way that supply chain compromise can be recognized, but it's just generally not a thing in those. But for Feedly, when you look at the incidents in this time frame, it was number 3. Which anytime I see things like that, I find that stuff super interesting. So Chris, I mean, maybe a little bit about how you guys are sort of identifying that stuff, and any thoughts on why that's common in what you're seeing.
Yeah, sure. No, it's yeah, such a drastic difference. It's really interesting. I'm gonna just share my screen and show you how we're collecting TTPs. So okay, so what you can see here is another dashboard that we have in Feedly. There are several ways to do it, but I'm just going to show you this dashboard approach to start with. And so it's a similar concept. Like, we're pulling from all like open source sites, basically, just trying to collect as much information as possible. And then we're using like a set of machine learning models to extract like TTP information from those articles. So it's not just looking for the ID, the technique ID, for example, or just like the keyword. It's also looking at sentence structures, trying to establish like if a technique is being spoken about within those articles, which is like really important. It's not just matching on. It's not just a basic keyword match. And so in this dashboard here, we've kind of got all of the TTPs, or the techniques, sorry, that we're seeing across all open sources. With this time filter here, we've got last 7 days. There's a few other options here. And so this is going super slow. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay, so yeah, so we can see now, just like in kind of in order of like how often we're seeing these techniques in the last 30 days. What's interesting is that you can see we've got like this delta number here, so you can see like whether it's trending upwards or downwards based when compared with the same time frame in the same time frame. We've also got the threat actors and malware associated with those techniques as well. So what's really cool is if you can see a technique that's trending, or maybe there's a threat actor you're researching, you can kind of search for it in here. Let's go with Scattered Spider and kind of see what their top techniques are within that time frame based on all of the information we've been collecting. And then another cool, so yeah, from here we've got another type of insights card. And so from here, this kind of tells you everything you need to know about Scattered Spider, or everything we collected. It's like we've aggregated all that information. But down here, we have all of the TTPs associated with this threat actor. And so, yeah, for carrying out your research into specific techniques or specific threat actors, it's a good way to kind of capture all of that here. you can map it to something like MITRE Attack Navigator to get a nice visual of those techniques as well. And there we go. And then Wade, like when you were doing it, were you using the dashboard or were you using like AI feeds to do it? Like what was your approach?
Yeah, the kind of a combination, and pulling some via the API and mining that kind of on our side as well. So it was a combination. A lot a lot of what we were doing, to be honest, was experimental and seeing what's there. But it was very useful in terms of fleshing this out because, as you might imagine, again, the traditional data sets that are incident disclosures, maybe they list an initial access technique, but they're probably not doing a full attack TTP analysis on what happened, the whole thing. So piecing those bits together and the ability to recognize it beyond a specific MITRE ID or phrase is helpful in pulling all of that together so that it can be analyzed.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Chris, one question we had in the chat was kind of related. It said, what are some practical ways to discover and assess threats, especially when the attack surface includes third-party vendors or supply chain dependencies, not just the tech stack in the organization?
Okay, so we can use like AI feeds to do that. So AI feeds are a way of like using our AI models to search for specific content or specific topics across all of the data that we have. So what was it looking for? Supply chain attacks?
Yeah, they said third-party vendors or supply chain.
Okay, so in here we can look for supply chain, cyber attacks impacting supply chain here. This is going to search across basically a bunch of sources here. We're looking for like our top sources only, which is like our most popular sources. But this is going to look for those types of attacks that are carried out using like, a supply chain attack, that kind of thing. So there's a way to do it there. There's also the Cyberattack dashboard where we have the filters set. If you set up the filters based on the attack type, you can use the supply chain attack type as well within the dashboard.
I'll mention because there's a question that hasn't been answered. Does the report consider the source of recent cyber incidents, like vendors being attacked? And I think this is the broader umbrella of supply chain or third-party attacks. It's not a thing that we get into a huge amount in the report itself. However, it is something that we have looked at. So for instance, we've published some reports around ripple events or multi-party security incidents. So trying to trace it from the breach occurs to one organization and then sort of spreads out from there. Either the breach itself propagates or impacts of that breach propagates to impact other organizations. And tracing that to the source and downstream, upstream has been a research topic. If you want to reach out, we can point you in that direction. But definitely something that's going on. I'll just point out that trusted relationship is one of these that is a top 4 now, and consistently low double-digit proportions. Trusted relationship is MITRE speak for the attacker exploited a trusted relationship with a third party to gain access to my organization. So the data is showing that that's pretty common. And then another thing I think is interesting is that if you sort of break up the most common techniques, and Chris alluded to this, right? These trends change, right? He was looking in the last 30 days, how are these techniques trending? We don't have just in this that kind of fine grain tuning. But if you back up, look at the big picture, you can certainly see that certain types of techniques are increasing. So trusted relationship is growing, becoming more frequent, more common in mid-size and large organizations. And I think that's because mid-size and large organizations are more likely to have a pretty extensive third-party network of vendors, right? And each of those represents a potential vector into the target organization. So therefore, that initial access technique increases. And then you look at and the valid accounts is not quite so dominant there in that realm. And then over here for smaller organizations, yes, you still see valid accounts, but it's actually trending down. And phishing is a bigger deal. Again, a lot of this comes down to smaller target, generally simpler attacks. Not always that case, but if phishing works against small business, wonderful. Attackers can scale that out and use that. So, I think that's it. We're right at time. I appreciate you hanging there with us. I mentioned that I would share this again. If you like what you saw here and you want more, this report will be published in the next couple weeks. You can register to be notified when it's published, and we'd love for you to take a look at it. And if you have any other questions, find us. We love to talk about this kind of stuff, and we'll be doing some other things around the report as well. Chris, Sean, any closing thoughts?
Somebody asked, what does the 119 mean on your CY?
Oh, it's a good story. So we wanted this to look like an element in a periodic table, and 119 is the next one. There's 118 currently, so it's the next element. And
Sounds
we
a
kind
little
of have this,
radioactive,
right?
probably,
The missing element is one of the things that we go for there.
Yeah, probably radioactive, I guess. All those big numbers are.
Yeah, it's probably terrible.
And then I'll give you one more. Who's the intended audience for the report?
Good question. So I think it's a mix. I mean, I think security practitioners will get a lot of value out of it, seeing these trends, because they're probably asked by management a lot. I think there's a lot in here if you are in cyber risk management directly. And then executives, even non-security executives are asking big questions like, are incidents getting more common or more costly? I need to be able to talk competently about this. So I think there's lots of different audiences for this report. It's not an uber technical deep dive into one single event. It's a very big picture. How are these things moving over the last 15 years? So if that sounds like for you or someone please share it with them.
All right. Well, thanks so much, guys. Thanks also, Joran. You answered about 20 questions in the background, I think. When we publish this, we will also put out. When we publish the link to the recording, hopefully, Wade, we can share your slides. We will also put all the questions and answers into a doc that you guys can access. So we'll make that all available within 24 hours. So again, Wade, Joran, Chris, thank you so much, and great information and good topic. So thank you.
Appreciate it, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.